So the first assumption that we want to test, and we're going to stay in Psalm 7 to test this, is the idea that these psalms would be okay to pray them by somebody who is completely righteous. In other words, they were written from a position of self-righteousness, the upright Pharisee being attacked by the tax collector. And it is simply not so when we read them with a little bit of care. Look with me at Psalm 7, and we have here in verses 1 and 2, David under threat. They're going to pursue him, they're going to kill him, they're like lions. When we look at verse 3, we see there, "O Lord my God, if I have done this." And it's that word "this" that is really important. David was being accused in the psalm by enemies of having done something specifically wrong. This is something that we see in the life of David very often, that, for example, Saul, for example, his son Absalom and others, they would come against him thinking or pretending to think, but persuading other people, that David had wronged them in some way and that they were demanding justice. And so what David is doing here is not saying, I am righteous and therefore I'm entitled to God's defense against any enemies. No, what he's doing is he is saying, I am being accused specifically of a particular sin, which will result in me being condemned to death. That's why verse 2, "Lest like a lion they tear my soul apart, rending it in pieces, with none to deliver." Now that might be a real court case, or it might be, as in the example of his son Absalom, just a populist uprising against him, a sort of pseudo-judicial deal. And that is why he then prays, if I have done this, if there is wrong in my hands, if I have repaid my friend with evil, or if I have plundered my enemy without cause, then let the enemy pursue and overtake, and let him trample my life in the ground. So all of the subsequent pleas of protect the righteous, they're not based on, you, Father in heaven, look down and see that I'm a good guy and they are bad guys. Rather, you see that I'm innocent of what I've been accused. It is no different from a Christian today in a criminal court. When asked, how do you plead? We don't answer a sinner through and through, do we? When asked to the charge that on the 15th of August or thereabouts, you set fire to this building, your options are, I did that, guilty as charged, or I didn't do that, innocent. And to say not guilty doesn't mean that you're righteous. It just means on that day, I was on a different continent in front of 200 witnesses who can vouch for the fact that while I might be a sinner through and through, actually, I didn't do that one sin. That is why earlier in describing the enemies, do you notice how David, in this psalm, in verse 14, describes the wicked like this? The wicked man conceives evil. Having conceived, he gets pregnant with mischief. Having gotten pregnant, he then gives birth to what? Lies. That's the point. David here is facing violence as a result of false accusation. And that is why he is pleading righteousness. He is pleading not guilt. Now, part of his defense may well be that, in principle, those coming against him are well-known troublemakers, that this is not a mistake they're making, but that they are deliberately, mischievously trying to kill David, and that he, for his own part, hasn't done it. That is still not a claim of righteousness or of self-righteousness. It is a very specific, very limited judicial defense. And all through the law of Moses, you will find those words, righteous and wicked, used not to describe in legal settings perfection, as opposed to not, but rather the righteous is the one accused of moving the boundary stone who didn't move it. The wicked is the one who did move the boundary stone, or the one accusing you of moving the boundary stone when you didn't in fact do it. So that's our first assumption. David is not saying, I get to pray against my enemies because I'm righteous. No, he is saying, my enemies are attacking me on the basis of a specific accusation of which I am not guilty.